Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you are keeping cool in this lovely warm weather if you're joining us from the UK. Lovely to see many of you again. Welcome to this session. I'm going to introduce myself, which is I'm Manveen. I'm the Learning and Insight Manager here at the MGAA, and delighted to welcome you to our session with HF Predict, Protect, Perform. New Data Advantage for MGAs. Before I do hand over to Simon and Gordon today, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping points. Many of these will probably be very similar if you've attended a session before, but just to recap, you'll notice that your microphone and camera are turned off. It's just so that we're maximising bandwidth and reducing any disruption to the session for you so you can get the most out of it today. You'll also notice that we'll be able to turn these on, so when you get to the Q&A you'll have access to them, so please don't be too worried if you do want to engage with us in that way. We do ask that you don't have any AI note-taking tools turned on or started. We don't have permission of everyone attending for these to be used, so I will have to remove those if they are enabled at all. We do encourage that you ask questions, and they're very much welcome in the session. You've got the option of popping them in the chat, or you can put them in the Q&A, and there is an option to post anonymously if you would rather that be the case as well. Any questions that we can't cover or don't get a chance to cover during the session, we will pick up at the end during a Q&A piece. So please do bear in mind, or we'll see where your question fits best. We are recording today's session, and a recording will be sent out to all of those that have registered. So if you do want to recap on anything, you can do that way as well. And you can obviously reach out to Gordon and Simon directly. And then finally, if you feel that this supports your learning and development or your CPD, you can include this on your CPD log. That's all from me. It leaves me to now hand over to Gordon and Simon. Over to you, Gordon.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for everybody attending. I'm Gordon Walker, and I'm the head of professional indemnity and financial lines at HF. Apart from that, I've had the privilege of working with Simon on his data analytics, which we're very pleased to be able to include in our offering at HF. I'm really impressed by what he does and how he explains things, and I hope you'll all feel similarly today. So with that glowing tribute to Simon, I'll pass you over to the star of the day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Gordon. That's very kind. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for joining the session today. My background, I mean, as it says there, I'm head of predictive analytics and data, but my background is actually in catastrophic injury claims. So I'm a lawyer by background. I've practiced in catastrophic injury for about 20 years now. My focus, though, what really interests and excites me is all around how we as a firm can improve performance for our clients on individual cases and across wider claims portfolios. So that effectively is what brought me to HF. I was at my previous firm for 15 years, but it's the scale of this kind of stuff that really kind of excites me. So what I'm going to do today, I've got a short slide deck. As Manveen has said already, if you have any questions as we go along, please do shout out. If this can be as interactive as possible, that's always the preference. But I'll go through some slides. I'll give some background and some context as to why we're doing what we're doing in this area, why we think there's a real advantage and value in doing it. But then, importantly, we'll move on to the demonstrations, which hopefully is of interest to all of you. What I'm going to do with those demonstrations is go through some of the predictive models that we're building. The idea about all of this is scale. So whilst we're going to focus on one predictive model today, which is in catastrophic injury, we are building multiple models in different business lines and segments. So it's by no means the limit of what we're doing. The plan of HF is to build predictive capability that's firm-wide. So yeah, it's certainly not just about catastrophic injury. I'll also talk about some data dashboards. I'll show you those, how they complement the kind of forward-looking view and the kind of forecasting that predictive modelling can give us. I'll talk through some example strategic reporting, because that I think is the way that is, it's really important that we package all of this in a way that's actionable for our clients. That's certainly the way that I've approached things. It's all about making data accessible, bringing it to life, and presenting it back to our clients in a way that can be really leveraged to full effect. And then also I'm going to talk about what HF are doing around data extraction, because that really is the bedrock of all of this. Obviously, if we have a really solid foundation of data, we've got accurate data sets, we've got complete data sets, consistent approaches, and ideally significant layers of automation. I think that really sort of supercharges what we're doing in this area. So in terms of the agenda, as I say, I'll go through this fairly quickly. I'll start with what I think is a real advantage for MGAs, which is all around bringing data to life, presenting it back to you in a way that is really insightful and actionable. Some context around the problem and most importantly the solution that we think can help us tackle those problems. I'll go through the operating model for action to what I think is, and I firmly believe is the HF advantage in this area. I'll touch on some use cases and decision support. So these are all examples of where we've used predictive modelling really positively. We've driven really pleasing results for our clients, and the most important feature of that part of the presentation is all around flexibility. So it's the agility to adapt to exactly what our clients are looking for. It's not by any means a one-size-fits-all solution. This is about understanding the particular challenges that our clients have got, and obviously shaping our service so that it meets those requirements. I'll then move on to obviously this is crucial. It's all about commercial value. So how does all of this kind of feed into capital control and improved performance? That's obviously a fundamental of this session. As I said, I'll go through the demonstrations towards the end, and then I'll finish off with some sort of concluding comments and why I think this is a really sort of pivotal part of the HF offering in the future. So in terms of the new data advantage for MGAs, so this is all around financial hygiene. It's about improving performance across claims portfolios. It's about driving those improved results. It's about improvements in all of the kind of core KPIs. So when we talk about different sort of areas of the business that we're building predictive models in, the kind of core theme that runs through all of these is improved reserving accuracy fundamentally. It's about accelerating claims life cycles. So how do we move from instruction to settlement as quickly as possible in as commercially focused way as possible, and how do we ultimately manage and control, mitigate that risk that we're facing across the portfolio to help ultimately reduce overall indemnity spend. So that portfolio control is a really fundamental pivot of all of this stuff. The turning data into earlier insight, faster decisions, stronger reserving, and faster claims resolution. This is about bringing the data to life. So it's understanding the predictive patterns that emerge from historic settled claims. It's about bringing that data to life. What are the interdependencies between the data points? How do we understand those sort of interrelationships between them, and how ultimately do we leverage all of this to produce reliable kind of forecasts as to where claims are likely to conclude in the future? And I think from an MGA perspective, that predicting more effectively, protecting capacity, performing with greater commercial discipline is really important. So for us, what really excites me is when I talk to clients, whether it's sort of traditional motor insurance or London market clients, what really excites me is when we talk about sort of capital efficiency, so release of capital for reinvestment as a stimulant for growth. That's the kind of area that I think is really important. I think it's incumbent on law firms in the kind of modern world to provide these layers of service on top of the traditional service. So we're saying that traditional relationships and expertise in particular areas vitally important. There's no getting away from that. But what HF we're focused on is just layering that service, that the traditional sort of strength of our relationships and our expertise with things that just elevate that service that step, or ideally steps higher. So that we're integrated with our clients, we're fully aligned with what they're trying to achieve, and obviously we become a really core component of how that's achieved. So all of that really is kind of distilled in that graphic on the right hand side on this slide here. So we looked at a portfolio of claims here. We saw, as you can see, aggregate reserves of nearly £900 million, ultimate paid outcomes of almost £680 million, and a financial variance or capital lockup of almost £220 million, which obviously is a significant sum. The idea of all of this stuff is if we can tighten financial hygiene, we can drop that financial variance to a more manageable level. We can then look at that capital release, capital efficiency point, and work with our clients to release that where appropriate. In terms of the kind of broader problem and the solution, so when I talk to clients, when I present to clients, which I frequently do, we've seen that the overall data position is problematic. It has been for ourselves at HF and any other competitor law firm. So having, accurate data sets, complete data sets, of sufficient granularity that we would need to build these predictive models and data dashboards is a perpetual challenge. So the difficulty with that, of course, is that if we have these problematic data sets that are incomplete, that are inconsistent, it leads inevitably to that point on that first bullet point there around inconsistent reserving, inconsistent decision making, limited visibility into emerging severity, and that obviously is problematic, because what our focus is on is how do we work with the data, how do we unlock the power of the data to identify those risk cases earlier, how do we leverage that information so that we can manage them more effectively, and ultimately how do we drive improved outcomes. So that obviously inevitably leads to that volatility point, the claims leakage, slower decisions, inconsistent decisions as well, I think is a really important point. And all of that contributes to that capital lockup and weakened control that we've touched on already. I think that final bullet point on the left-hand side, again, though, is a key one. So, without that earlier intervention, without those mechanisms to identify those cases early, that inevitably leads to problems further down the claims life cycle, and the ability to influence those outcomes and control the capital that's required to resolve these cases. For us, and certainly for me, the solution is clear. It's a suite of predictive models. So as I say, I'll go through a catastrophic injury valuation model. We've got lots of other things. We've got a portal exit propensity model for lower value, higher volume cases. We've got, there's work that we're doing in credit hire, in fraud, in property, in aviation. So really diverse examples of where we can apply predictive modelling, but the suite of predictive models is key. So it's that flexibility, the agility to build multiple models and ultimately get to the point where we have a firm-wide capability. That's very much our focus. And the key point is all around proactivity. So it's how do we triage cases earlier? How do we identify those predictive patterns more proactively? And how do we use that? How do we leverage that to improve reserving accuracy, enable us to intervene earlier? We can then obviously influence the outcome of those cases much more effectively, accelerate the claims life cycle and reduce that overall leakage. And the point, as it says on the bottom right-hand corner, it's all about stronger control, better capital efficiency, more consistent underwriting and claims performance. So the underwriting point feeds into what I said earlier around the layers of service that HF are looking to develop. So, I've done a lot of this work in the past where you're working with underwriting teams, working with actuarial modelling. I see that as a really important part of the HF service. It's about building those layers into the overall proposition so that we're really integrated with our clients. We're aligned on your objectives, your targets, and we're a really important component of how they're achieved. In terms of our advantage, I won't spend too long on this slide, but the kind of pie chart on the left-hand side, these are kind of core components of any predictive model. It goes without saying, but the way that we're building these models around data composition, distribution, obviously we have to have a really flat distribution of claims to avoid prejudicial outcomes. Bias mitigation and reduction is key, as is obviously privacy and confidentiality. We anonymise all of our data that we use to build these models. Ethical integrity, of course, is absolutely fundamental as well. In terms of our advantage then, and why I think predictive insight can really help MGAs make a difference. I've touched on those KPIs, but it's that reserving accuracy, the acceleration of life cycles from instruction to resolution, and how we can reduce the leakage that occurs throughout that period to improve overall financial control. The current areas of focus, as I've said so far, are complex catastrophic injury in the top left-hand corner. We've got a model for portal exit propensity, motor, credit hire, fraud, property, casualty, and aviation, as I've mentioned. But the important point here is that, again, it's all about scale. So it's about understanding, what is it that our clients are looking for, understanding your unique sort of challenges, how we can go away and we can build something to help you meet and tackle those challenges. That agility point is a really, really sort of foundational part of all of this. So in terms of use cases and decision support, there's just some examples on this slide. What I like about this slide is that it gives a kind of an idea of how agile this approach is. So whether it's a case-by-case approach, which can be really, really, really informative in terms of driving proactive handling on individual cases. It can be used to sense check the adequacy of reserves, how we quantify offers of settlement, or even if we want to sense check offers of settlement that we've received. That's a really important component of the HF service. Obviously, the portfolio analysis is kind of broadened, so we're looking at rather than the individual claims. We're looking at a group, a cross section of claims. I'll come on to that when I demo the model in a few minutes. The targeted settlement project approach is a really interesting one. So we've got one particular client, a motor insurer client of ours. They love this approach because they say, well, what we want to do and what they have done, I think on about the 5th project now, what they do is they instruct us on 50 or so what they call troublesome cases, so cases that haven't been sent out to panel. They're the kind of sticky cases that haven't really been progressed for various reasons. They haven't been sent, as I said, out to panel until this point. But what they do is they send us 50 or so cases. They'll send all of their other panel suppliers a similar number, similar kind of profile of cases. What they'll do is they'll say, we want you to spend the next 6 months settling as many of these cases as possible, and then at the conclusion of the project, we'll benchmark performance of all of those panel providers, and we'll see who's performed best. HF have performed best consistently in every project, not just on the volume of settlements that they've achieved, but also in terms of the savings against reserve. And I think that predictive modelling is a really core component of that, because what predictive modelling can do, it can give us that confidence to make those early offers of settlement, really proactive strategies to achieve that settlement quickly and commercially. And we've seen, as I say, the highest volume of settled cases, but also the biggest savings against reserves. So that's I think a really good example. Due diligence in an M&A context, probably more appropriate for this MGA audience. So that's work I've done in the London market, where a particular client was interested in acquisitions, and the target acquisitions obviously can be the pricing that they attach to those acquisitions. Predictive modelling can be transformative in that context, because it can quickly assess the risk or the exposure that they're potentially taking on in that target acquisition. That then links into competitive pricing really helpfully. So that's been another really useful example of the difference that predictive modelling can make. In terms of post-settlement benchmarking, we look at historic settled claims data. We can look at performance across claims teams. We can break that down by injury cohorts, by particular geographical regions, whatever it might be. We can break that down into really sort of detailed level of granularity. Similar to that, we've got annual portfolio health checks, where we work with clients on an annual basis. So in the build up to reinsurance, for example, we can sense check the adequacy of reserves across claims portfolios. So just some examples of where we've used predictive modelling to really positive effect, and all of that, as it says in number 7 there, is underpinned by that really detailed trend analysis and reporting that I'll give examples of later on in the presentation. I think this slide is more kind of focused specifically on this audience. So I think the predictive signals that we can see across the data, once we unlock the power of the data, we can really bring it to life. I think these for me are the 3 key kind of pivots of where I think that predictive modelling can really make a difference. So reserve movements and forecasting where those reserve movements are likely to take place, but also that kind of the value trajectory. How do we intervene as early as possible so we can minimise the impact of that? I think is a really important feature of all of this. Life cycle delays obviously is key. We know, it goes without saying that with extended life cycles and elongated life cycles, we're seeing increased costs. We've modelled that, and we can see that there is significant impact of those prolonged claims life cycles. Conversely, we know that if we can accelerate those claims life cycles, we can significantly reduce peripheral medico-legal disciplines, for example, which obviously results in significant savings on disbursements, as well as the overall cost of handling the claim and the third-party costs associated with that. I think the segmentation and the broker trends are really important here. So how do we track the trends and the themes? And again, this is all about the kind of forward-looking view with predictive modelling, but also packaging that with a kind of backwards-looking view, and in terms of, okay, what have we seen on historic cases? What are the themes and the trends that we've seen emerge in particular books or particular segments of the market? It's all about kind of bringing that to life and reporting that level of insight back to our clients. In terms of the decision engines, then, we've used predictive modelling for triage scoring, obviously reserving adequacy. We can see that. I'll demonstrate that when I come onto the model in a few minutes. Really obvious examples of how we can control overall spend, how we can track capital efficiency, where the opportunities are for improvements, and what we can do to make those recommendations and really make that difference. And I think the confidence and rationale point is really important as well, because the validation of the models is a constant part of our job. It's something we're looking at, all the time. It's the validation of the model performance is absolutely fundamental here. So to build layers of confidence into the modelling that we produce, and obviously the explainability of our model outputs is absolutely core to what we do. And then the final point there, MGA action. So again, prioritising handler workload. It's obviously about resource allocation. It's about tracking how we can optimise every layer of the service, really, where we can look to where we see that escalation those escalation flags or those escalation risks, what we can do to intervene, and what ultimately we can do to improve the overall outcome of the case. So I think that probably covers off that slide, but I think there's definite direct application, predictive modelling, and what we do around data analytics that is really valuable in the MGA space. I think in summarising those kind of commercial value points, though, I think these are the ones really that jump out for me. So the capital efficiency point, I think, is key. The margin preservation and what we can do to help improve overall performance is absolutely vital. That validation of the model performance, again, is key. The tail risk and identifying those cases that are susceptible of deterioration or claims inflation is absolutely fundamental as well. So, what can we do to flatten the performance across claims portfolios? How do we avoid those reserve shocks that become so problematic across portfolios? How do we identify those outlier cases and mitigate the risk that's on those those outlier cases? That we know that they're the cases that disproportionately impact overall portfolio performance. So identifying those cases early, intervening, as early as possible, and as I say, mitigating that risk is vital. The reinsurance point, I think, is a key one as well. So reinsurance and actuarial modelling. So I've done a lot of this work in the past with scenario modelling. So that might be adjustments to the discount rate, for example. It could be building in more conservative estimates around claims inflation. Those things are absolutely key in terms of how we built these models. So I'll demonstrate that in a few minutes. The portfolio visibility and risk selection, again, the segmentation and benchmarking. This is all about identifying performance across a group of claims. Where are the strong sort of areas of performance? Where are maybe the more weaker elements? What do we need to do to correct that? It's all about that risk identification and managing these claims as effectively as possible. And then ultimately, the final point there, claims insight. It's all about cost control. It all feeds into, obviously, to profit loss ratios, and it's all about tightening hygiene across the portfolio to improve that overall outcome. And importantly, as number 6 says there, the value of this, I think, is that we do have that flexibility to expand and scale, which I think is absolutely key. So I've gone through that quite quickly. I don't know if there's any questions that anybody has so far. Shall I just keep going, Manvi? I'll take that as a yes. So if I could just jump to, sorry, just bear with me 1 second. Stop sharing that.
Yeah, sorry, Simon, my mute wouldn't come off, but no questions so far, so please carry on.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Apologies for that. So what you can see on this screen here, this is a catastrophic injury model that we've built. So the key kind of prognostic drivers of value down the left-hand side. So these are the individual parameters that we've built in to the model. It's all really intuitive. It's easy to use. You'll see that there's just a drop-down option. Well, the age is on a slider, but the rest of the features are all drop-down options. What's really important to stress here is that under occupation group, you can see you have one of those drop-down options there. The reason for that is that this works on the predictive modelling output, works on and draws from historic settled claims data, but it also links directly to the ASHE earnings index. It also links to the Judicial College guidelines as well. So that's how the occupation group is important. You can see the injury severity there. That's also important because of the Judicial College guidelines point. If I scroll down the model here, you can see all of these features are all fairly self-explanatory. So whether or not the claim had issued proceedings, whether or not the injury required peg feeding, ventilation, 24-hour care. We've also got period of hospitalisation. We know is a key kind of signpost for injury severity and ultimate evaluation of the claim. We've got compromised life expectancy there, Glasgow Coma Score, etc. You can see that the applied discount rate defaults to 0.5%, as you would expect, but that can be adjusted. As I say, that's an important feature around scenario modelling. You can also see that the applied claims inflation rate is set at, or defaults at 3%. If that needs to be changed, if it needs to be tweaked, it can easily be done so. So, for example, if we have a child brain injury case where we know that there's going to be a significant delay before the claim is settled, before the claimant reaches cognitive maturity, for example, we'll need to apply, obviously, a significantly higher claims inflation rate. The ASHE age band there, obviously, that links into the ASHE earnings index. So we've got some fairly self-explanatory sort of features there, and based on that, you can see that we've got evaluation on the right-hand side. Now, if we change any of the features, just change age, for example, you'll see that the model will recalibrate. It gives an adjusted valuation based on an adjusted set of parameters. So all fairly straightforward on an individual case. Where I think that the HF offering really stands out, apart from anything else that's available in the market, is this screen here. So this is the bulk analysis. So what we've done here, we've ingested data on a large number of claims, and we've run the model on a bulk basis. So you can see across the top of this table, you can see the parameters that you saw on the previous screen. But importantly, if we scroll across to the right-hand side, we've got this column here, which is the valuation column, which is the currently held reserve. We've then got, in this column I'm hovering over here, the model prediction, and then next to that we've got the error column, which is the positive or negative variance between the two. So the value of that, if I just jump to this screen, can I check you can see an Excel spreadsheet there, Mandy?
Yep, that's coming through.
Brilliant, thank you. So what I've done on this screen, I've exported a subset of those claims that you saw on that bulk analysis. So I've reduced the number of column headers here just for ease of reference, but these broadly align with the columns that you saw on the previous screen. What you can see in this screen, obviously, we've got each of the claimants set out in column B. We've got the age in column C. We've got the occupation, injury type, so on. I won't go through all of these. Importantly, though, we've got the currently held reserve in column M. Next to that, we've got the predicted value according to the model forecast. And then next to that, we've got the variance, so the financial variance between the two. So we've built in some data bars into that column. The blue bars obviously is where there's a positive variance, the red bars where there's a negative variance. So the idea of this is that we can easily identify, we've got some easily identifiable visual triggers for where we think, okay, we're either over-reserved or, more importantly and more concerningly, under-reserved. So this case here, for example, this is a severe burns case. We've got, according to the model, we're £132,000 over-reserved in terms of what the model forecast is. So there could be some very good reasons for that, but equally there might be an opportunity to drop the reserve to try and tighten the financial hygiene on that case, and then obviously across the wider portfolio. If we scroll down though, we'll see there are certain cases here where we are significantly under-reserved according to the model valuation. So we've got this case here, a traumatic brain injury case, and according to the model, we're under-reserved or overexposed by over £180,000. So that would certainly be a case that we would recommend diving into to try and understand why is the reserve where it is. Is it correct that it sits where it is? As I say, there could be some good reasons for that, but the idea of this is to identify those cases where we think we've got susceptibility for under-reserving. So if I scroll to the bottom of this page, you can see the figures are aggregated there at the bottom. So we've got a positive variance of £7 million or plus 6%. So in other words, across the claims portfolio, we're more than adequately reserved. But within that group of claims, there's clearly areas for potential improvement. So column T there, we can see a tolerance column. So we've built in a tolerance level of minus 10%. Anything which exceeds minus 10% automatically red flags. So a number of our clients, they love this approach because it enables us to work with them to identify those cases that we think we're at increased statistical risk on. And we can try and understand the reasons why the reserve is where it is. We can take those steps to rectify that if required. And ultimately, it's all about, as I say, helping them manage and mitigate the risk across the claims portfolio. So that is the kind of forward-looking view of predictive modelling. What is equally important, though, is using data and looking back at historic settled claims. What can we see? What are the trends, the themes that we see emerge across those group of claims? So this is an example. Manveen, can you see a Power BI dashboard I'm sharing there? Yeah,
grey
thank
one.
you.
Yeah, that's coming through.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. So this is an example of the kind of bespoke reports that we provide to our clients. So this is to complement what we do on predictive modelling. So we've got the forward-looking view, we've also got the backward-looking view, and I'll come to the sort of strategic report, which kind of brings it all together. This is an example, as you can see, one client was particularly interested in tracking performance on property, commercial risk, and personal lines cases. So we've got, you know, it's all bespoke. It's built for them. It's, you know, it's exactly, you know, what they asked for. It's aligned to their kind of areas of focus and priority. This is a sort of, you know, distribution of the portfolio. If we wanted to look at just the live cohort, we can easily do that. If we wanted to separate the settled cohort, again, we can do that. Everything all recalibrates depending on what it is the client wants to look into. If we wanted to look at handling units, you know, we can easily do that. Everything updates, obviously. It's designed for interrogation. It's designed to be interactive. In terms of reserving, we can see, we can break this down however you like. We can look at, you know, injury cohorts. So let's look at amputation cases with traumatic brain injury, spinal cord, and polytrauma. Again, everything updates depending on what it is that we want to drill into. Similarly, with claims life cycles, we can look at, you know, average life cycles by injury cohort here. If we wanted to just look at personal lines, we can isolate that business segment. Equally, if we wanted to aggregate that with property, we can do that. And then in terms of paid outcomes, again, what's the composition of the paid outcomes? What's the differential between corporate risk, personal lines, property? Again, it's all about the trends and the themes that we can see emerging from those sorts of cases. And then the final screen here. So this is all around the key trends, the themes, the kind of the trends that we're seeing emerge across the portfolios. What is it? Is there a particular challenge in a geographical location? Is there a particular injury cohort that's causing more problems than others? Is there anything we can do to positively impact that in the future? So that really is, you know, how we package all of this together. I mentioned a strategic report. I've got two examples of that. So this is one example of a report that I put together for a client just last week. So they were interested in predictive modelling on a cohort of claims with a sort of heavy focus on complex orthopedic trauma cases. So that was the focus on this particular report. As you can see, we've got some narrative around, you know, the executive summary, what we've observed across those claims, what the themes are that we've seen emerge. We've got some summaries here around, you know, value bandings, what the average valuations are, the median valuations, all that kind of stuff, the range of valuations, claims list of profiles. We've then got individual reports on each of those cases. So they were keen to sense check the reserves they were holding on these claims. And so we have predictive modelling outputs for all of those cases that they identified. A different approach is on this screen here. So this was a different client entirely. They were interested in delegated authority versus non-delegated authority performance. So what does it look like? Intuitively, they thought, well, DA will outstrip non-DA performance, but what does it actually look like if we kind of go under the hood, if you like? So this was quite a detailed report. It breaks down performance on all of their performance metrics. An approach that they love this level of granularity. We've got obviously average damages awards, life cycles, third-party costs, defence costs, disbursements, and then overall indemnity spend. And it's the analysis which is set out in the executive summary here that's most valuable to them. So we can see across the analysis, we can see that non-DA performance was 7% higher on average damages spend. It was 25% higher on average claims life cycles, 38% higher on third-party costs, 25% higher on defence costs, and then 18% higher on overall indemnity spend. So another quite positive example of how we can use the data, we can bring it to life, we can unlock the power of the data, and then we can report it back to a client in a way that's really sort of insightful and actionable. So conscious, again, I'm going through this quite quickly. I don't know if anyone's got any questions so far, or if you want me to just crack on.
No questions so far, so let's continue. But again, just a reminder, you can pop them in the chat and QA.
Okay, thanks, Manveen. So we've looked at predictive modelling. We've looked at forecasting claims outcomes on live cases. So how we can forecast likely outcomes on these cases, how we can have those reliable drivers for ultimate outcome, how we can help then kind of mitigate that risk, manage that risk as effectively as possible. We've looked at historic settled cases, so what are the themes and trends that we're seeing across claims portfolios, how we can bring that to life, package all of that together to inform claims handling strategy, and obviously with the aim of improving overall performance. The challenge that I frequently see when I present to clients, when I meet with clients, is obviously they're very data rich. The challenge obviously is how do we maintain the data? How do we maintain its accuracy? Maintain complete data sets, accurate data sets that don't feature any anomalies. It's obviously a perpetual challenge. It's something that is significant. Well, it creates real operational inefficiency, because when we've got handlers, you'll have your own handlers that don't have time to do this. There's a friction between managing the sort of management information, the data that goes into all of these models, and the dashboards that we build. The challenge is maintaining that, making sure that it's accurate, and we have this really solid foundation to then build these sorts of models and dashboards that you've seen. The kind of our approach to try and help tackle that, I'm going to show you just very quickly on the screen now. So this is a short video. This is an agent that we've built that's designed for catastrophic injury cases. So this has been trained to think like a catastrophic injury lawyer. It understands the data points which are important for catastrophic injury claims, why they're important, what the kind of the interaction is between those data points, the interdependencies between the data points, and how they interact to produce those reliable forecasts on outcome. So what we've got here, I'm going to attach, it's about 10 documents there. There's about combined 1,500 pages that we've attached to the agent there. Now, this is a tetraplegic case. It's reserved at about £8 million. It's far from straightforward. It's a complicated case. Finding these data points is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. If we were to ask our handlers to locate all of these data points, it would take at least a day, if not longer. What you'll see is the agent will digest all of that information, all of those documents. It will go away. It will find those data points that we've told it are important. And it will come back, and it will, what you'll see in a few seconds, it will come back and it will list all of those data points for us. And I think it's taken about 30 seconds or so to do that. So just bump this on a little bit. So what you'll see there is a list of those data points. There's about 120 in total that the agent has gone away and found for us. You'll see that the agent has listed the data point down the left-hand side. It's given us a value for that data point, and it's also importantly given us a source and location. So the value of the source and location, obviously, if we want to sense check the accuracy of these, if we want to just check that that's correct, I think from an accuracy perspective, that feature is really important. If we look at age of claimant, for example, we can see the page, the paragraph of particular medical legal expert reports. We know exactly where to look to check that that's accurate. As we go down, you'll see all of the kind of key data points you would expect to see on a case of this type. They're all listed. We just pause there. You can see that the primary injury is a really technical explanation. So we've got high cervical spinal cord injury at C4, incomplete tetraplegia. You can see with reference to the secondary injury, we've got fractures at cervical spine, we've got transverse process fractures, etc. So it's a really technical, kind of complex catastrophic injury focused explanation of the claimant's injuries. Again, we've got reference to where that's cited within the various documents that the agent has reviewed. You can see all of those data points that are important when we went through the model. They're all listed. So the period of hospitalisation is really important, obviously, as a barometer of injury severity. With a case of this type, there won't just be one admission to hospital and then discharge. There'll be various periods of treatment. So whether it's a high dependency unit, then they'll be discharged somewhere else. They'll then go into therapy and rehab and whatever it might be. The agent will make the calculation between those periods of treatment and therapy, which I think is a really important feature. That, in my experience, is an area that is fraught with inconsistency. When we have human handlers interpreting this sort of information, that you guarantee that there'll be a divergence in opinion in the way that these things are calculated. having this standardised approach is hugely important, and I think for us is a real step forward from an operational perspective. It standardises the approach, it speeds up the approach, it enables us to rationalise data sets. So I've done a lot of work recently with clients that have taken on other businesses. You've got different case management systems, you've got different legacy systems. This kind of cuts through all of that, so it can really help rationalise those data sets. And as I say, that's pivotal towards giving us that really solid data foundation to then do all the other really clever stuff that can be done with predictive modelling. So as we go through all of these features, none of it comes as any surprise. We've got hospitalisation, GCS score, whether or not the claimant was PEG-fed, ventilated, 24-hour care. We've got reference to life expectancy, capacity, all those features that you would expect to see on a case of this severity. All of those features are captured, which obviously has really significantly improved the process for that data capture. So in terms of where we are currently, we've expanded this since this video was recorded. We're now in a position where we can extract those 120 data points on 180 cases at the moment, but that's been grown all the time. The idea for HF is to get to a point where we can extract on 1,000 cases at a time, 2,000, 3,000, whatever it might be, and that then gives us that extremely strong foundation to then build predictive models and the data dashboards that you've seen to provide that level of really detailed insight. So I'm going to stop sharing there, Manveen. That was my kind of 40-ish minutes. I was thinking that I'd banked on some questions that I thought might be raised. So I don't know if any have come up in the chat.
Yeah, we've had one that's come in directly actually, and just I think again kind of based on what you've covered so far, the person who sent this in is just wondering if you're currently working with any MGAs currently. So I don't know if you're able to share that information at all.
We are, yeah. I probably can't name them, but yes, we are. We're working with two MGAs at the moment on various projects. So I think the predictive modelling is a real sort of area of attraction for both of them. I think they see real value there, but also the data analytics is key. I think the package of the two combined is quite a powerful one. So we're working with both of those MGAs. They're partnering with us on data that they provided. So it's a really exciting development for us.
So actually, there's a follow-up just come in from that, and I think you perhaps just about to start answering that. The follow-up question is: are you working with any clients that are willing to share their own data with you? And I think you mentioned that one of the MGAs or that you're working with has. So is that a wider thing you're seeing, or if you can elaborate on that question at all?
It is, yeah, absolutely. So we are working with a number of clients, well, with MGAs that they're partnering with us on data. Also, traditional sort of motor insurance clients are partnering with us. So I mentioned the portal exit propensity model. That is a significant challenge for a number of insurers. So in an effort to try and tackle those predictive patterns to identify those cases at risk of escalating in value. That's an area that we've got two different clients that are partnering with us on data. They're giving us huge amounts of their own data to use that as a way to build these models, to produce those modelling outputs and identify those cases that are at increased risk.
Fantastic. I've just put a reminder to everyone that they can obviously ask questions in the chat and in the Q&A function. So I'll see if anything comes through there, but we have had one that was actually submitted in advance when I sent out the reminder this morning, who I think they wanted to know, I don't know if they're with us in the session, but one that we had submitted was, what are your plans for the department to grow in the coming months and years? So it'd be interesting to get some insight there from you.
Yeah, no, I think the department is growing pretty significantly, to be honest. So I joined HF about 18 months ago. This is all new since. So this is something that I've developed sort of since I joined the firm. The team has grown significantly around me. That's in direct response to the appetite across the market. So there's at the moment, it's a great challenge to have, but it's quite a challenge just keeping up with the demand, which is, as I say, a really positive thing from our perspective. but we're growing significantly. We've got data scientists that have joined the team. We've got project managers, developers. There's all sorts of different areas of specialism that are coming into the business, which I think is a really positive thing, and also quite reflective of how law firms are changing. Because I think 10 years or so ago, those areas of expertise just weren't present in law firms. But I think that's another part of HS proposition, is moving quickly, moving in a really forward-thinking and modern way, and bringing the right people into the business that can make a difference.
Fantastic. I mean, that's all the questions that I've actually had come through, either directly to me on the Q&A or what, like I said, the ones submitted in advance. I mean, I don't know if anyone's got any final questions. I'm not going to make everyone stay online until 2 p.m, especially given the weather, but it's obviously an opportunity to ask questions to Simon and to Gordon. Microphones and cameras are enabled if anyone wants to ask directly. Whilst I see if any questions come through, Simon, I think you're about to say something there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if anybody would like to ask any questions or discuss anything after the session as well, please, don't hesitate to email myself or Gordon or Nick, who's also on the call. We'd be more than happy to have a chat about anything else in more detail then. But yeah, I suspect that the weather's might be an issue, man. People are melting in their offices.
Absolutely melting, or you've covered everything in such detail that those are the questions for today. I think that probably is going to be all of our questions. So I will start to wrap up, and thank you to the offer. If anyone has questions that come up naturally, afterwards, or you think of anything, please do reach out to Simon. I'm just going to share the link to our feedback survey. We'd really welcome if you can spare a few minutes just to give feedback, continue allowing us to deliver webinars like this for the benefit of you, our members. Can't see anything come through while I've just shared that and while we've just kind of wrapped up. So I'm going to say thank you to Simon, Gordon and the HF team for their session today, and thank you to everyone for giving up some time in the sun to come along and attend today. Really appreciate it. Hope you all keep cool as you can, hydrated, and we'll speak with you all soon. So thank you again, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day. Thanks, Bambi.
Thank you all. Bye.